Does Donald Trump understand that he and the whole world will lose if Putin wins? We will speak right now about all of these topics. My name is Iryna Uzlova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report in English, Rashkin News. Yuri, hello, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Iryna. Thank you for having me.
Czech President Petr Pavel stated, "We will all lose if Putin wins in Ukraine. Russia is testing NATO's resolve and Europe risks repeating the mistakes of 1938. Czech President Petr Pavel, a retired general, warned that the Russian victory in Ukraine would be a defeat for the entire West. During an interview with the Sunday Times at Prague Castle, the very site where Hitler proclaimed the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia in 1939, Petr Pavel compares the West's current behavior to the policy of appeasement on the eve of World War II. Recent allegations of secret negotiations between the US and Russia, particularly regarding the transfer of Ukraine territory, are dangerously reminiscent of the 1938 Munich Agreement. If we allow Russia to emerge victorious in this conflict, we will all lose," Pavel emphasized. Yuri, does Donald Trump understand such seemingly simple and dangerous at the same time things, and how much is he doing to allow Russia to win?
I'm afraid that Donald Trump doesn't really have the same priorities that you and I and that sensible people in this world have, because rather than respecting borders, rather than respecting law, he would rather respect money and the power of a deal. And I think that that is coming, unfortunately, as a lightning strike for people who were not paying attention. Because for those that were paying attention for the last year since this 47th president was returned back to the White House, it was clear that this is the direction he was headed, and everything we saw about the decisions, they only don't make sense. They only seem irrational if you don't think that they fit into a greater picture and puzzle, which has now been revealed with this national security strategy document that was published by the White House this week. And it's beautifully outlines the horrible mess that we're getting ourselves into, which is the destruction of Pax Americana, the end of the world order that was created by the United States following World War II. And we decided as United States that we've had enough and we're going to walk away from it. And this sends a very, very unmistakable signal to any other country that ultimately Donald Trump doesn't see Russia as a problem. He's not worried about World War III. This is why we have all these strange conversations about if you are supporting Ukraine's resistance against Russia, then you are supporting dragging the world into World War III. But now we're looking at a situation where the United States is never going to go to war with Russia. In fact, it's going to just worry about stabilizing the world, because that's what apparently our priority now is, to stabilize everything, because NATO can't take everybody in. Europe is on its own. And we're out of here. This is going to be a tremendous loss, not just for Ukraine. This is a tremendous loss, not just for Europe. This is a tremendous loss for the United States. And as a citizen of the United States, and I'm terribly disappointed and troubled by the direction my country is headed in, because comparisons with Chamberlain and 1938 and 39 and, is worrisome, because Chamberlain at least was interested in the peace for the right reasons. He was trying to preserve borders. He was trying to preserve, out of best intentions, the world that he failed. This president is looking to sell us out. And this is what this kind of a grifter world that we're in is all about. We're seeing his emissaries, grifters, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, traveling around the world, destroying the idea of international institutions as they go around. Because apparently we don't need Secretary of State other than to give interview to Fox News. Please wipe up the mess on aisle 9. Who is wiping the mess? What is being up with a rag? rag, that's our Secretary of State, and it was obvious when he was appointed to this position that he was going to have to swallow his pride. Everything that Marco Rubio said as a senator is going to be irrelevant, and now he's going to have to destroy his legacy in order to survive in this administration. It's just, that's what that looks like. And apparently Marco Rubio is fine with it. But Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff traveling and conducting these negotiations about peace process is also destruction of war, of any sort of order. This is just basically King Trump trying to negotiate with these rebel Ukrainians about how to shut them up. And it's because stability with Russia is what matters, because now the Western Hemisphere is ours. This is the Monroe doctrine with a Trump touch, Donroe doctrine. And so what does this mean for Canada? I don't think they're going to like it. It's a terrible document. It's a terrible policy. It's a terrible direction. But it's just another situation where Donald Trump always takes like the worst possible choice he can possibly make, and then announces that he won. And if you disagree, then you're no longer a Trump supporter. So that's how that works.
Yuri, remarkable that the Kremlin has praised the change in the U.S. national security strategy with satisfaction. They say it will help end the war in Ukraine as it should be. The changes in the U.S. national security strategy, in which America criticizes traditional allies but not Russia, and also accuses European officials of obstructing the end of the war in Ukraine, in many ways corresponds to the Russian vision, says the press secretary of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, in an interview with Russian propagandist Pavel Zarubin. The current administration is fundamentally different from the previous one, and of course now President Trump is strong in terms of domestic political positions, and this gives him the opportunity to adjust the concept in accordance with his vision. The Russian agency Interfax quoted Peskov as saying, Peskov noted that the changes in the U.S. national security strategy in many ways also correspond to the Russian vision. Yes, we notice it too. I can add, is Trump surrendering both Ukraine, Europe and the United States to the dictatorial regimes like Putin's with this change in his national security, his really, not American, but Trump's national security document? How do Americans and congressmen reach to such behavior? And is Trump threatened, for example, by some protests or maybe impeachment or maybe some strong words against such way of national security?
I think what we're dealing with here is a really big problem that needs to be addressed. And that is the President of the United States appears to act in a way that contradicts interests of the United States as laid out in policy documents, in laws, including 2017 CAATSA law, CAATSA, which CAATSA requires Congress to review and approve any attempt by President to lift sanctions on Russia, mandatory sanctions on Russia for aggression, election interference, cyber attacks, energy projects, and military action, and strict penalties for facilitating Russian corruption, oligarch finances, or influence operations. So Trump cannot make a deal with Russia behind closed doors. It's illegal. It's according to, like, literally. And it's interesting, why would that pass such a law? Were they concerned on anybody specifically? Because it was passed veto-proof, and Trump signed it, kind of like he signed publication of Epstein file, where he was against it until everybody was for it, and then he had to be the winner, and so he signed it, but we don't think it's always going to go as smooth as it's supposed to somehow. And in this situation with CAATSA law, we see a similar approach where President signs a law he doesn't like, he says it ties his hands, and now we see why, because 8 years later, he's trying to facilitate this, what he calls peace, but in essence appears to be violating a 2017 2017 law. And if that is the case, if that the law is expressly shows that those are American interests, and president is acting in interests that are opposed to that, then what other conclusion would there be that he is working either against America and or with Russia? And whether it is being done because he sees American policy this way, or because Russia published this document, translate and send it over, and he published it as national strategy, national security strategy document, doesn't really matter, because the facts are on its face. It shows that this president and this administration is leading us in the direction that is pro-Kremlin. I think that is like 2 + 2 = 4. And on some level, I think it should be so obvious that one should wonder, where's the police? Where's the prosecutor? Where's the prosecution? Where's the nurses? Can somebody do something here? And no, because as long as our Attorney General and that Department of Justice is going to be concerned with finding way to move to file charges against the Attorney General of the state of New York, Letitia James, for her against her because she's basically personal enemy of President Trump. And as long as the Department of Justice is occupied with those problems, they clearly are not going to be occupied with things like COTSA law of 2017 and the consequences in breaking that law. So we're just pretty clear that that's not going to happen. So at least we have a clear understanding that the Senate and Congress, House of Representatives already in 2017 were concerned about this president doing what he's doing now. They came up with a law against this, and now Kremlin says, well, this administration is fundamentally unlike any other. This is great. Yes, it is great for Kremlin, and we should all be very concerned. And I think that it's whether it is done on purpose or not doesn't really matter. Facts speak for themselves.
It's a pity that in such way Donald Trump...
A pity. It is such an understatement. What a pity. What a country this has been. And what a pity. Although, on the other hand, speaking about this from Ukraine and the problems that Ukraine is facing, the kind of stuff we're dealing with, national security strategy. Ukraine is dealing with lights out and no electricity. So I want to kind of stop for a second and send my thoughts and support and solidarity to all our viewers, listeners, if anybody, or just in Ukraine, you, Iryna, and thank you for doing your job.
Thank you for your position, for your time, and for your thoughts, and all your work on all your YouTube channels. Guys, please subscribe to Yuri's channels. It will be very pleasant to meet you.
Follow me on Substack. Do me a favor. If you want to subscribe to Rashkin Report on Substack. In English, I think that's just would be the best. Thank you.
But such Trump's behavior and positions in this document, it's not the occasion to impeachment or big protests, because it's like something very eternal.
Iryna, you bring up a very good point. I'm hearing this a lot from my Ukrainian viewers because I'm doing most of my media work in Russian on Ukrainian channels, definitely not on Russian channels, but in Ukrainian Russian language speaking channels. Iryna and I speak quite frequently these days, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to have our conversation in English once a week. But impeachment of this president is something that Ukrainians are all of a sudden very interested in. I can't blame them. I think it's a very natural response when you see a leader of supposedly your greatest ally behaving in a way that is disruptive, destructive, and all the other bad things you can think of. And you're going, how long can we close our eyes? How long can we pretend that this administration really means well, but just in such a weird way? And I think Ukrainians no longer can. And this is why the question about impeachment has become so pertinent. Here's the thing. We need to have a House of Representatives and Senate both voting for impeachment in order for impeachment to occur. That's one option. That's the impeachment option. And right now, House of Representatives, majority is in Republican hands, and Senate is majority in Republican hands. Moreover, in Senate, it's just not majority. They need 60 votes. So that's a super majority. and they have nowhere near those number of votes. Now, there's going to be elections. There's always elections, especially there's going to be elections in November of 26, where if Democrats gain some votes and not too many, they're only 2 down, they can have majority. And in fact, it's possible they could even have majority before the election if several Republican Congress women, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace, Don Bacon, there's a couple of others resign, this situation could shift drastically quickly. But that's not enough, because you still need to have 60 votes in the Senate. And even if 2026 goes well, the elections for Democrats, it is hard to imagine how poorly Donald Trump has to be doing in order for Democrats to gain 60 votes in the U.S. Senate. I mean, Alabama is unlikely to go Democratic anytime this millennium, unless they suddenly decide that, things switch like they did in the 1960s. But nonetheless, that means that we're going to have a Senate that's not going to be friendly to impeachment, and House Representatives that might very well be. What does that mean? No impeachment, but impeachment proceedings, perhaps, and definitely investigations and the end of Trump legislative agenda. So that's going to be great already, because it's going to be very helpful, because legislative agenda sounds nice, but when you look at the big, beautiful bill, no thank you. This is basically crony capitalism. It's not policy. So in that situation, no laws is better. Thank you very much. Close the House, go home. On the other hand, impeachment is why we're here, and that means that it's not likely to happen unless Donald Trump does something so egregious that there will be several, God forbid, Republicans who will vote for the impeachment, and not just several, but like enough, which is really impossible, enough Republicans who will vote for impeachment, then it could happen, I don't know, today. Really, that's the thing. It's like war with Putin. When is the war going to end? When Putin decides that he is done, or whoever knocks him all out decides that now it's time to make peace. Similarly with Republicans, they can stop this madness anytime. They can impeach Trump tomorrow, but they just don't have the balls. So it's a struggle. How to survive in politics without balls. It's hard for them. But there is this matter of 25th Amendment, which I find fascinating, simply because on one hand, this cabinet, these secretaries watch the 3-hour butt licking. Well, I'm just quoting President speaking about Secretary of Defense War Hegseth. Is he an ass licker? Quote President. This is, you would not think that this would be the people who would not impeach, but use 25th Amendment to remove a president and in his place put a vice president, because that's what my understanding is of a 25th Amendment. And I'm looking at these people, I'm going, on one hand, they have no little brain, they're basically just loyalty to Trump and cruelty as much as possible. Loyalty plus cruelty seems to be the recipe there. But maybe if they start to feel that their days, hours, minutes may be numbered, and they could be out, and without Trump, they're nothing. And in fact, they're danger to the regime, because they could write a book. Although, well, no, Kristi Noem already wrote a book, and I think Pete Hegseth as well, so who knows? But I think that they just, if they're not given a nice way out when they're fired, if they feel like they're getting kicked out or they panic, in that situation, I see a small chance where a group of these lizards, essentially, I don't know, lizard brains, I don't want to start a new conspiracy here, foster old conspiracy, then something could happen on 25th Amendment. But other than that, I think we are stuck with this president. And what's worse is that foreign policy often is of least concern for American voters, who are mostly concerned with prices, because we thought that if we chose a fascist but saved on egg prices, then that would be worth it. Turns out the egg prices are not saving the situation, and they're going up, and everything is going up because of the terrible policies of this person who, among other things, chose a really dumb ideology to follow. And so all of this together combined is putting us here where we have to just deal with this regime, the Trump regime, in a way that we have using the tools we we have available, which is elections, which is also courts, which is also protests and peaceful protests. And I think that this is just the level on which Americans are looking at this. And I think Ukrainians are in a situation where they hitched their wagon to this powerful train of the United States that was going to pull Ukraine out from Russia and help. But now this American train seems to be going off the cliff. And so it's probably a good time for Ukraine to disconnect itself from that train before it goes far, far in the wrong direction and hitch its wagon perhaps to European train. Which is slow and but apparently is producing more weaponry now and more ammunition than Russia. So that's a really good place to start.
Yes, and we wish our European allies be more confident and quickly, but really their support is enough now to avoid.
I will accept this. If they're not confident but just panicked and scared of Russia, I'll take it. That's good enough for today.
Yes. The Ukraine agreement is almost ready. The ownership of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the Donetsk region remain unresolved, said Trump's special envoy Keith Kellogg. The last 10 meters to the target are the hardest. I think if we resolve these two issues, the rest will fall into place, Trump's special envoy said at the National Defense Forum at the Reagan Center. Furthermore, Kellogg reiterated that after the war ends, the U.S. will not send its troops to Ukraine as part of peacekeeping missions. We understand it clear. I don't think an agreement on Ukraine will be reached. I don't think Trump will receive his peace prize for Ukraine. Even if there is a short-term ceasefire, it won't last. I think the end result for Europe will be catastrophic and unfortunately the war will continue, said Timothy Ash, Associate Fellow in the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House. According to Axios, Zelensky, Ukrainian president, spent 2 hours on the phone with Witkoff and Kushner and other Trump's envoys, including about Donbass. They talk about that fact that Russia continues to demand that Ukraine should leave Donbass. The U.S. trying is to develop ideas to find a solution. But we see that really this question, territorial question, about the Donetsk region, about Donbass, is the most controversial, and Russia will never make concessions here, never. Where did Keith Kellogg get such optimism from, and how much is Timothy Ash right in his assessments?
What I'm concerned about here is that we are watching this play being played before our eyes, and we're supposed to look at it and go, whoa, look at this. This is going in the right direction. I wonder how it will end. It will end with blaming Ukraine for not agreeing to peace on Russia's terms. That's what this is all about. This is about, oh, we're so close. We're so close. What does that mean? That means that if we're not there, it's your fault. So we're so close, 10 meters. That means we haven't entered the stadium yet, because that's diplomatic BS to say that really nothing is happening, but it's Europe's fault. It's Ukraine's fault. This is where Alexander Stubb so importantly said in the leak that we got from Der Spiegel about European leaders speaking behind, having a private conversation with Zelensky, where the Stubb says that they're trying to play you and they're trying to play us. This is a game that we're being spun around here, trying to show that this is all about how it is fault of Ukraine that it is not surrendering, that it is fault of Europe that it is supporting Ukraine, which is not surrendering, because we're so close. The only thing Ukraine has to do is surrender its territory. We're so close because Putin can stop any time, not because Ukraine needs to surrender territory. And Kellogg's, it's interesting that even as he's playing a good cop, he still is not good enough for this administration. He's still getting, retired. And it's interesting, again, is he going to be retired into some kind of a push position? Or, well, he's over 80, so what is he going to care about? Is he now going to write a book where he's going to finally tell exactly what he's been thinking, and it's going to be so great? We're going to be like, why didn't you say it when it mattered? So maybe that's what's going to be happening. But I think Kellogg and this administration are just trying to set up Ukraine to take the blame, take fault for the fact that Russia won't stop failing at war.
Yes, we see. But how to solve this issue of territories? It seems to me that Trump doesn't know exactly. Not Trump, neither Kushner.
It's very simple. It's do a better job than Biden of providing aid to Ukraine.
To
Because the
Ukraine and
reason,
sanctions,
that's,
Euro and sanctions against Russian Federation. Pressure,
and
more
yeah,
pressure.
sanctions are great. I'm not going to deny it, but many presidents have tried, and Russia is still there. And yes, the price is escalating, and that's a beautiful thing because that was the goal. The goal has been reached, only it's not doing anything because escalating a price for Russia, which doesn't care about the price. Again, this is very similar to what we see with, we see like it's, even though Donald Trump is older than Vladimir Putin, there's a kind of a consistent approach to their governance in a sense that there is no consequences for Vladimir Putin for sure, and Donald Trump thinks for him because he can go on a Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and nothing's going to happen to him. So he thinks that he can, now he's surrounded himself, Trump, with this, he lives in a bubble. That's been beautifully described in an article. And he is meeting his secretaries that are telling him how amazing he is, and he's still falling asleep. What does that mean? He's bored. It's not enough. He needs bigger entertainment, more praise. You know, FIFA just gave him their first world whatever prize because not for soccer, but because they have a champion, you know, the World Cup in the United, no, never, because he's amazing president. Is it going to keep him happy? I don't know, for a little while probably, but it sounds like from reporting we're seeing from the White House, no, it's not enough. He needs more praise, more gratitude. When Ukraine said thank you 78 times, that was clearly the wrong way to thank this president. He doesn't get just thank you. He gets bored, he falls asleep, he needs more. And with Putin, we're seeing this mindset 25 years later, where he goes, I don't care, just go to war. And if people, if 1% of Russian males have died so far in this war, 1%, it's a huge number. Putin doesn't care. So for him, the price of war is not the cost, is not the reason to stop or start anything. It's just when is he, so we probably just kind of either A, we got to stop him from getting bored so he kind of gets over himself, or we just help Ukraine to disable Putin's war machine, because he's going to be playing with this war machine as long as he wants because he's bored. And Ukraine needs to disable that machine and build its own society going forward, which is not necessarily going to be built on joining or not joining NATO. I think there are examples of countries around the world that have been, taking care of its own security by militarizing its population to extent sometimes necessary and required through military service and conscription and just paying attention, unlike Europe, which counted on the United States for decades and now is now playing catch up. And I think Ukraine is learning valuable lessons. But I think that this president is just not going to be key to Ukraine's success. And for Vladimir Putin, the cost of this exercise is irrelevant. And therefore, it's just his bank account needs to be emptied out because he's going to be playing as long as there's money in the bank account. So whether it's through sanctions, whether it's because he's not able to make money on his oil and gas, that's the question. So maybe it's just a matter of hackers who can just empty out his bank accounts wherever they are, wherever his cryptocurrency is hiding, and that's all of a sudden we're going to be like, oh, the war's over. What happened? I don't know.
Not only Zelensky talked to Witkoff and Kushner, also the Ukrainian delegation is working in Florida this weekend and is holding discussions with Trump's special representatives. Zelensky also reported about it, and he emphasized that Ukraine is determined to work honestly with the American side in the future to really bring peace. We agreed on the next steps, the formats for talking with America. Thank you to President Trump for such an intensive approach to the negotiations. Our approach is that everything should be able to work. Everything is important for peace, security, and reconstruction. How do we need to build the right tactics for such kind of negotiations with Witkoff and Kushner? What hopes be placed on Kushner? Does he take a pro-Ukrainian position? Does he have influence really over Trump?
I guess the question is what is the state of Witkoff-Kushner can provide to Ukraine? What are the guarantees, safe security guarantees that the state of the Witkoff-Kushnerium can provide? Because maybe it's the Kushnaria-Witkoff of Iryna. I don't know. What's the capital there? Is it Stevia? It's crazy because this is not diplomacy. This is a couple of guys sitting in Miami.
Yes.
Yeah, big boys. And then they go, oh, let's talk to Zelensky. Because Zelensky calls in, and for 2 hours, they, milk him to try to surrender on, in these negotiations. It's ridiculous. It's gangsterland. And so I think that what Ukraine seems to be doing is stalling for time, which if that's what they're doing, I can't blame them because what choice do they have? There's nothing else but not agreeing to capitulation. And if Witkoff and Kushner can't understand it, then maybe they should consider, would they chop off their arm for $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion is their number. And I think that this is just something that they are failing to understand because to them, clearly everything is negotiable, especially when it comes to other people's money, other people's land, other people's stuff. They just want to come over there and put a Trump sign on it, get a peace prize, and get out of there. It's such grift. It's just grift, but that's what Timothy Snyder so well described as a grifter's bubble, because at some point it bursts. And what we're seeing here is a world order in which United States decided to transition from being a world cop to being a world gangster. But in that world, the world doesn't need United States as a gangster. The world needs either somebody who's going to provide protection on laws and rules-based order against Russia. And if United States is not able to function in that, or God forbid, to basically decides to join Russia in now on paper, practically, effectively, then the world's going to have to solve its problem differently. And but at the same time, this is no reason to spit in the face of the United States. I mean, that face is so beautiful and gorgeous and dangerous and big that why would you want to do that? So if you have to take 2 hours of your time and then spend it talking to Witkoff and Kushner in order to defend your country, then that's what you do. But the joke is that it could have been not Zelensky but Schmilensky. They would have done the same thing because Ukraine ain't able to surrender because they know what's coming with they know the cost of that, even if Witkoff and Kushner have no idea. And so Zelensky is playing the part of the president of Ukraine. That's what he's there to do. And I think that all those who thought that maybe now that we can get rid of Yermak, or we can get rid of this person or that person, or we can get a different president, unless this is a pro-Russia president, which is going to lead to another Maidan, it's going to be another president that's going to say exactly the same thing. So maybe United States could get the message, realize that they're not able to sell Ukraine, but they're not going to stop. It's such a juicy piece of real estate they've already convinced Russia they own, that this is just a big struggle for them. But I think Ukraine is just doing the right thing by acting in a very nice way, agreeing with the idea of peace. Of course, who doesn't want peace? Ukraine needs peace more than anybody else here. In fact, it could happen anytime as soon as Mr. Putin is done throwing himself at a wall. And Mr. Putin, who is Mr. Putin? Mr. Putin is a gangster too. So I think in this situation, Ukraine just needs to build relationships with European countries and beyond Europe. Honestly, I think this is a crucial opportunity for Ukrainian diplomacy to reach out to find partners across the world, because you never know when Canadians or South Koreans or Japanese might feel that it is now in their interest to more actively help Ukraine, as Ukraine also maintains the understanding that its armed forces is the main guarantee of its future safety and present safety.
Yes, really, and we show every day, every month that we want really peace, but only fair peace. Yuri, thank you very much for this conversation, for your time and position. See you next week. Take care.
See you next week. Take care.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channels Rashkin Report in English, Rashkin News. My name is Iryna Uzlova. Guys, thank you for watching us. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, to Substack Yuri Rashkin's. See you next week. Take care.